Hello guys, Charles here and welcome back to my channel. I've made a few videos on picking technique in the past and I've always been a bit more conversational about it rather than showing you exact things to do. However, for today I'm going to give you some actual practical picking advice, things which I think are pretty important. And these ideas we're going to cover today are designed to primarily get your hand in the correct position and to cover the most challenging aspect of picking as frequently as possible so that you're really heavily tackling that topic. So this first idea is one of the most important things that we'll cover today, and that is not only this idea of outside and inside picking on a string pair, but also the right hand position. If we just take a really simple exercise, so this is an exercise which I use a lot as a warm-up and as a kind of reminder of the mechanics of my right hand. The most difficult thing about picking is swapping from one string to another. So in this instance, it's moving from the B string to the E string. Now the reason that's difficult is because there's two different ways we can do it. So this is called inside or outside picking. So to do inside picking, we can play that little exercise we just played, but starting with an upstroke on the B string. And what we'll find is that our plectrum goes up on the B, down on the E, up on the B, down on the E, and it kind of creates this little U shape. And we're going to be staying almost like we're stuck between those two strings. It sounds like this. And hopefully you can see I'm starting on an upstroke, down, and my plectrum's staying like wedged between those two strings. So that's inside picking because I'm picking from within the strings, inside the strings. So outside picking is the opposite, starting on a downstroke, down, underneath the E string, up, down. So it's really important to practice both of those. Get comfortable being inside the strings and outside the strings. Now, what you're really trying to focus on here is for each of those movements, you'll probably find your hand looks different as you pick. The real point of this exercise is to learn how the right hand works and how it should be working at all times. So when I use this as a warm-up, what I'm doing is reminding myself of how my picking hand functions. I try and keep the movement as small and focused as possible so there's no wasted energy and excess movement. But I look at the basic mechanics of how picking works and I try to make sure that no matter what I'm picking, my hand roughly looks the same. So I used to find that my picking hand would look different depending on what I was picking, and quite drastically different sometimes. So we need to make sure that our picking hand stays consistent so that when we get to doing an inside or an outside picking movement, our hand's already in the right place, rather than not only having to do that difficult movement, but also having to shift your hand into the position in order to be able to do it, if that makes any sense. So we need to work backwards from having the correct hand position first to tackle these inside and outside picking motions and apply that to all the picking that we do. So when I'm picking this exercise, if I just switch my volume off here, I'm looking at what my hand looks like for both of them. So I'm noticing I've got a bit more motion on my upward picking one, my inside picking. So I'd work on getting that a little bit smaller, a little bit less motion there, and then try and make that my standard picking motion no matter what I do, because that's obviously the trickiest one that needs the most movement. So that's going to be my maximum movement that I allow myself to use when I'm picking. The point of this is to train your right hand basically into the correct picking pattern. You don't need to copy someone else. You teach yourself how to do this by using the most challenging picking motion we have, which is inside and outside alternate picking. Now the issue with the pattern I've just shown you is it's not very musical. So when we're practicing, we want to spend most of our time using actual musical cells. But an easy way to make that a bit more musical is just to make it fit a scale. I could pretend I'm in C major and I can go, rather than just doing 3 next door frets, I can just pick 3 next door diatonic notes. So in this instance, I can play that same picking exercise outside and inside, and that's like now a bit usable. I could actually use that as a bit of a musical chunk. So wherever you've got the option, stick to scale and arpeggio ideas rather than just random shapes and chromatic patterns. Now, how fast should you play? You shouldn't pick any faster than you can do the inside and outside picking. So most of us find we can pick quite fast on a single string. However, there's no way I could play patterns at that speed. Why? Well, because remember, the main roadblock here is how fast we can move from one string to another. So I would suggest that you figure out what your speed is. So about and then try and just improvise all alternate picked at roughly that speed. Okay, so there's a few duds in there, but I was just trying to stay at that speed. I've got to be like 100% confident at that speed before I start trying to push the tempo. So when I do want to start pushing the tempo, how fast should I push it? What I use is my left hand top speed to dictate the picking speed. And this is for when you try to push the speed in practice. There's no point in me being able to pick 100 miles an hour if my left hand can only move at 60 miles per hour. That means I'm going to be getting out of coordination and out of sync. Work on accuracy and coordination between the hands as a priority over speed. So what I would do if we were taking this same exercise as our example, I'll just mute my strings with my left hand. I'll be Steve Vai for a second here. Okay, that's the fastest I can play with my left hand. There's no way I can pick it at that speed. We already know that this is one of the hardest things to do, but that's the picking speed I'm going to aim for. So this is me trying to push my speed. Scrappy. My right hand technique was changing, which we don't want. Remember, we've already decided the best way, the most efficient way to tackle that motion, and we need to keep that hand position consistent. So that's why that speed was no good for me. I lost my technique. So that is absolute limit how fast I would ever want to play, and probably a good 10-20 BPM less than that is going to be a really sensible challenge where everything stays in place, I'm relaxed, and I've got good technique. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is this idea that we should practice things two different ways. I've already shown you with that simple lick we've been looking at today, how we want to practice it starting on a downstroke to do outside picking and starting on an upstroke to do inside picking. Well, as I keep confessing on this channel, I'm terrible at discipline, and I can set myself a routine and I'll stick to it for a few weeks, and it'll eventually just fizzle out. And part of that routine is always inevitably to try things starting on an upstroke and a downstroke. So a better idea, I think, choose musical material that you are going to practice. It's going to inspire you to practice it. It could be a tune you're trying to learn, or it could just be something that you know sounds nice and you're going to want to use it in your improvisations. And you want to build into the exercise starting on an upstroke and starting on a downstroke, so that you don't have to stop, play the exercise again a different way. What ends up happening is we feel like most of the time we're good starting on a downstroke and less good starting on an upstroke. So if we actually make the lick cyclical in a way that it ends up repeating itself on the opposite stroke, and then we can just loop it over and over again, and we practice it equally on the downstroke and the upstroke. So it's easier to give you an example than it is to talk about it. So if I start on a downstroke there and play that over and over again, I'm only ever going to start on that 12th fret of the B string. Always going to be back to another downstroke. So all I need to do is add another note in, give me an odd number of notes, and it'll suddenly flip my right hand so that it's going on an upstroke on the repeat. So I can go like this. So just doing that, I'm now practicing inside and outside picking every bar or so. So a good way to bring all of this stuff together into one exercise is to use 3-string arpeggios. Something I do a lot, again, as a warm-up after I've got used to my inside and outside picking, is to try and keep those movements the same in my right hand. I don't want my right hand suddenly looking like it's coming from a different player. And I'll take just a simple arpeggio and I'll choose a 5-note arpeggio spread out over 3 strings like this. So I'm just going there through a C7 arpeggio. Now, when I go back up to the top note, I'm going to be on an upstroke. So that final exercise kind of ticks all the boxes. It's got inside and outside picking between the strings. It's a usable bit of music. It's a dominant 7 arpeggio, which we can use in all sorts of instances. I'm not pushing the tempo ridiculously fast. I'm just letting the left hand dictate the maximum tempo I can go, but letting the way that I can actually pick in between the strings be my maximum limit and trying to stay just under that. Just like a weightlifter doesn't go into the gym and lift the absolute heaviest weight, they lift a weight that's manageable and work it through for several reps. We want to be the same on our instrument. I was able to build the upstroke and downstroke start into that lick so that by the time I've played it twice, I've played it starting on an upstroke and a downstroke. And finally, I was crossing several strings there, which puts my hand in a slightly different position. So I hope that those are tips that you can use while you're practicing your alternate picking. So if you did find that one useful, please do give it a like, subscribe, ding that notification bell, and share with any of your friends who are maybe getting a bit carried away with their metronome. And as always, I hope you're all doing very well, getting plenty of practice in, and I very much look forward to seeing you in the next one. Cheers.
Roll up, let me embed a story you'll never forget. A drip, drip, you're drowning in debt now. You can't buy your way out.